The contractor did not look at my father when he answered. He looked at the invoice. Cabin, kitchen, bathroom, plumbing, deck reinforcement, flooring, he said. Those were the 4 phases. Jordan slid a copy of the bank statement across the table. And these payments? The contractor nodded. Those match our deposits. Dad leaned forward. The cabin is family property. Grandma's voice came from beside me. No, it is. Everyone stopped. She was 84, sitting in a wheelchair with a blue blanket over her knees, but her voice was steady. Dad turned toward her. Mom, you know I've always said the cabin stays in the family. Grandma lifted one hand. I said you could have the cabin when your father died. I did not say you could use my care money to remodel it. The room became silent enough to hear the heater click on. For 3 months, Dad had told us Grandma's assisted living budget was too tight. He had asked me to contribute. He had asked Aunt to contribute. He had said medical costs were draining everything. Now the contractor's invoices were sitting on the table beside the bank records. New cabinets, new flooring, new deck, paid from the same account that supposedly could not cover Grandma's care. Dad looked at me. This is not what it looks like. For once I did not answer. Grandma did. It looks like my money bought your kitchen. I spend my working life telling families that independence is not the same thing as doing everything alone. I am an occupational therapist in Madison, Wisconsin. Most of my patients are older adults recovering from strokes, fractures, surgeries, or illnesses that suddenly make ordinary life complicated. A shower becomes a risk assessment. A front step becomes an obstacle. A kitchen cabinet becomes a question of reach, balance, and strength. I am patient at work. At home, apparently, I was patient to the point of stupidity. My grandmother had lived alone since Grandpa died 9 years earlier. She was a retired elementary school librarian who kept index cards in her purse, corrected grammar on restaurant menus, and refused to own a television larger than 32 inches because she said anything bigger made the news too confident. She lived in a small ranch house outside Madison. My father, Frank, lived 40 minutes away. He was Grandma's oldest child and had always been the practical one in her life. He fixed gutters, changed furnace filters, negotiated insurance renewals, took her car in for service. About 6 years earlier, Grandma had signed a durable financial power of attorney naming Dad as her agent. Aunt, Dad's younger sister, lived in Illinois and was listed as alternate. Nobody thought much about it. Dad had run an HVAC business for decades. He knew bills, he knew contractors, he knew how to get things done. Grandma trusted him. So did I. Then Grandma fell in her garage. She fractured her hip and spent 6 days in the hospital, followed by 3 weeks in rehabilitation. The fall changed things quickly. She could still think clearly, but walking became exhausting. Her bathroom was narrow. The laundry room required 2 steps. She had started forgetting to use her walker at night. When rehab discharge planning began, I suggested assisted living for at least 6 months. Grandma frowned. I am not 90. No, I said, you are 84 with a new hip. That is very different. Eventually, she agreed to tour 2 communities. She liked the second one, not because of the apartments, because the activity room had floor-to-ceiling. I could volunteer in there, she said. The monthly cost was high but manageable. Grandma had savings. Not millions. Enough. She had sold a small parcel of farmland years earlier, had retirement income, and kept most of her savings in conservative accounts. Dad had once told me she had more than enough to be comfortable. So when I asked him about the assisted living budget, I expected a simple answer. Instead he said, we need to slow down. Why? Her accounts have taken a hit. From the hospital, from everything. I asked how much was left. He gave me a vague number. Then another. Neither matched what he had told me the year before. I should have noticed, but he was my father, and family trust often survives several warnings after professional trust would already be gone. We reserved the apartment anyway. The community required a deposit. Dad said he would handle it. 2 weeks later, my phone rang while I was between patients. The caller was the assisted living admissions coordinator. Maya, she said carefully, I wanted to check whether the deposit is coming from a different account. My stomach tightened. What happened? The payment was returned. That was the first moment I stopped thinking Grandma's finances were complicated, and started wondering whether someone had made them complicated. I called Dad from the stairwell at the hospital. The deposit bounced. He sighed as if the assisted living community had inconvenienced him. I know. Why? Timing issue. What timing issue? A transfer had not cleared. From where? I am handling it. I hated that sentence immediately. Not because he had never said it before, because I had heard families say versions of it at work. I'm handling it. Don't confuse Mom. Dad doesn't understand money anymore. We don't need to explain every detail. Sometimes those sentences were harmless. Sometimes they were doors closing. I asked Dad to send me the current account balance. He said he would. Nothing arrived. The next morning I texted again. He replied, there's enough, stop panicking. I was not panicking. I was counting. Grandma had already signed the residency agreement. Her rehab discharge was approaching. If we lost the apartment, we would have to scramble. I called Aunt. Do you know what's going on with Grandma's accounts? She sounded confused. Frank said medical bills were worse than expected. Insurance covered most of rehab. Maybe taxes. That did not make sense either. Grandma's tax payments were predictable. Lowered her voice. Do you think something is wrong? I don't know. It was the honest answer. That afternoon I drove to Grandma's house. Dad was there sorting mail at the kitchen table. Grandma was napping in the bedroom. I sat across from him. Show me the account. His face changed. Not guilt exactly. Annoyance. You are not her agent. I know. Then why are you acting like an auditor? Because her housing deposit bounced. He pushed a stack of envelopes together. I moved money around. Where? Between accounts. Show me. No. The answer came too quickly. I stared at him. Why not? Because I am not going to have my daughter second-guess every financial decision I make for my mother. Then explain the one that caused her care payment to fail. He stood. I have spent 6 years managing this, and I appreciate that. No, you don't. You show up after one fall and suddenly you're the expert. That hurt because there was enough truth inside it to make the accusation stick. Dad had done more day-to-day work for Grandma. I knew that, but work does not buy ownership. Did you use her money for something unrelated to her? His eyes moved away from mine. Just briefly. Then he said, everything I do is related to this family. That was not an answer. I followed him into the hallway. Dad. He stopped. How much is left? Enough. How much? He turned around. Why are you obsessed with a number? Because numbers do not get offended when you ask them to explain themselves. I did not say that. Instead I said, because Grandma is about to need $7,000 a month in care. His jaw tightened. We may need everyone to contribute. That sentence landed differently now. Everyone. You, me. I looked toward Grandma's bedroom. How much did she have before the fall? Dad opened the front door. We are not doing this here. He left. On the table beneath the pile of mail, one envelope remained. It was from a building supply company in. Dad's lake cabin was near. I did not open it. I did not need to. For the first time, I knew exactly what question I needed answered next. The cabin had belonged to Grandpa. When he died, Grandma gave it to Dad. No lawsuit, no complicated estate, a simple transfer. Grandma said she would never use it alone, and Dad had always loved the place. He spent weekends there fishing and repairing things. At family gatherings he called it the family cabin, but legally it was his. That distinction became important. 2 days after I saw the building supply envelope, Aunt called me. Frank says you accused him of stealing from Mom. I asked where the money went. He says you're making this into elder abuse. I almost laughed. I'm asking for records. He has power of attorney. That is authority to act for Grandma, not permission to do anything he wants. Went quiet. Do you know something? Not yet. Dad did what people do when they want to turn scrutiny into betrayal. He made the conflict about my tone. He told I was disrespectful. He told Grandma I was stressed from work. He told my ex-husband during a school pickup that I was spiraling about family finances. That one made me furious. Then he called me. You're embarrassing me. Give me the statements. Stop saying that like I owe them to you. You may not owe them to me. You owe an accounting to Grandma. She knows what I'm doing. Great, then show her. Silence. I asked Grandma directly the next day. We were sitting in rehab while she practiced transferring from a chair to her walker. Grandma, has Dad talked to you about spending money on the cabin? She frowned. The cabin. Renovations. He said it needed work. Did you tell him he could use your savings? She looked genuinely puzzled. Why would I pay for his house? That sentence was simple enough to frighten me. Did you sign anything? I sign lots of things he brings. My professional brain turned on. Capacity, consent, understanding. I asked carefully, do you know roughly how much money you have saved? She gave me a range. It matched what Dad had told me a year earlier, not what he was saying now. Do you know what the assisted living apartment costs? Too much. I smiled despite myself. Approximately. She named the amount within a few $100s. Grandma was not incapable. She was dependent. Those are not the same thing. That evening Dad texted me. Mom says you interrogated her during therapy. I replied, I asked whether she authorized spending on your cabin. He called immediately. You are poisoning her against me. Did she authorize it? You don't understand the arrangement. What arrangement? The cabin stays in the family. It already belongs to you. I've put years into that place. With your money. With everyone's time. That wasn't my question. He raised his voice. You know what? Maybe Mom doesn't need that fancy assisted living place. There it was. The money question had become a care question. If she can't afford it, show me why. She can stay home with help. Who provides the help? We rotate. I work full-time, lives 2 hours away. We are family. I had heard that phrase so often it barely sounded like language anymore. Family. Sometimes it meant love. Sometimes it meant unpaid labor. Sometimes it meant access to money that belonged to the person least able to fight about it. I said, I'm going to ask Grandma's bank for a review with her present. Dad went silent. Then he said very quietly, if you do that, don't pretend you're not choosing a side. I looked at the phone after he hung up. He was right. I was choosing a side. Grandma's. Before contacting an attorney, I tried one family meeting. I wanted to be able to tell myself later that I had given Dad a clean exit. We met at Grandma's house after she returned from rehab. Drove up from Illinois. Dad arrived with a legal pad and 3 folders. For a few minutes I felt hopeful. Then he began talking before anyone else sat down. Mom's expenses have increased dramatically. He listed home repairs, insurance, taxes, medical, food delivery, transportation. All real expenses, all plausible. Then he said Grandma's liquid savings had declined by almost a third in 18 months. I asked for statements. He slid a summary across the table. Not statements. His summary. The categories were broad. Household medical property, family expenses. Other. I pointed to property. What property? Maintenance. On Grandma's house. Somewhere. Dad's face tightened. The cabin needed structural work. Looked up sharply. Frank. He held up a hand. Before everybody reacts, understand what I did. The deck was unsafe. Plumbing had to be replaced. The kitchen was original. I stared at him. Grandma paid for the kitchen. She contributed to improvements on a family asset. It is your asset. It is not like I sold it. Grandma was sitting at the end of the table. Her face had gone still. How much? She asked. Dad looked at her. Mom, we've talked about this. No, she said. You talked. How much? He gave a number. 32,000. Whispered Jesus. Huh? I asked whether that included materials. Dad said yes. I asked whether it included labor. Mostly. I asked whether there were other cabin expenses. He became defensive again. You want me to produce every receipt from the last 2 years? Yes. He laughed. That was the moment hope left the room. I proposed the easiest solution I could think of. Dad would provide the full bank statements. Every cabin payment would be totaled. He would sign a repayment plan. Grandma's assisted living deposit would be paid immediately. And until the issue was resolved, would become co-agent for major financial transactions if Grandma agreed. Dad stared at me. You want to supervise me. I want a second person seeing large transfers. I have taken care of Mom for years. Huh? Grandma spoke. And I'm grateful. Dad turned toward her. She continued. But if you used my money on your cabin, you need to tell me how much. He looked wounded. That almost worked. Dad was very good at making accountability look like ingratitude. You think I stole from you? Grandma did not answer. He stood. After everything I've done, said sit down. No. I said, Dad, nobody is denying what you've done for her. That is exactly what you're doing. He gathered the folders. I reached for the summary. He pulled it away. Leave it, I said. It's mine. It's an accounting of Grandma's money. He shoved it into his folder. Grandma watched him. I will never forget her expression. Not anger. Recognition. The kind that arrives when a person realizes a relationship has been operating under rules they never agreed to. Dad left. 10 minutes later, Grandma looked at me. I want to know. Know what? All of it. That was the moment this stopped being my investigation. It became hers. Grandma's bank scheduled an appointment for the following week. Dad was because he was her agent. He did not attend. Grandma did. So did I. The bank officer explained that Grandma, as account owner, could review every transaction. We started with 18 months of statements. The pattern was not hidden. It was just disguised by ordinary vendor names. Building supply, remodeling, Lake County plumbing, cabinetry concepts, a lumber yard, a flooring company, a hardware store near. Some payments were small, others were not. Grandma sat beside me with her reading glasses low on her nose. At first she said nothing. Then we reached a payment to remodeling, $10,000. She tapped the paper. What was that? I don't know. The bank officer said only Dad could explain purpose, but vendor records could clarify if legally requested. Total transfers and card payments connected to cabin area vendors were already above $40,000. And we had not reviewed everything. Grandma asked the bank to remove Dad's online access temporarily. The bank officer explained that changing agent authority was not as simple as clicking a button, because the power of attorney document still existed. That was when I called Jordan, an elder law attorney. Jordan reviewed the document. Your grandmother can revoke the power of attorney if she has capacity and wants to, he said. But given the family dispute, I recommend documenting her capacity and preferences carefully. Dr. Foster evaluated Grandma. She found mild age-related memory changes but concluded Grandma understood her assets, care needs, family relationships, and the consequences of changing financial authority. Grandma revoked Dad's power of attorney. She named as new agent. Dad exploded. Not at Grandma. At me. You manipulated her. She asked for the records. You put ideas in her head. She knew what a bank statement was before I was born. Then the contractor records arrived. Jordan had sent a formal preservation request and later obtained invoices with Grandma's authorization, and during the protective proceeding that followed. Caleb the contractor kept excellent records. There were photographs, change orders, payment schedules, email threads, invoice descriptions, kitchen cabinets, quartz countertops, new bathroom plumbing, luxury vinyl flooring, deck reinforcement, electrical work. Some repairs were necessary, some were improvements. All were on Dad's property. The total paid from Grandma's accounts to cabin-related vendors was $56,800. That number did not include Dad's own labor. It did not include small cash withdrawals. It was simply what the documents proved. Then Jordan found something worse. Dad had reimbursed himself $12,000 from Grandma's account under memo descriptions like property management, maintenance reimbursement, emergency repair coordination. When asked what property he was managing, Dad said both Grandma's house and the cabin. But the cabin was not Grandma's property. The simplest evidence came from an email. Caleb had sent Dad a revised kitchen estimate. Dad replied, "Use the same account as the deck. Mom won't need the cash this year if we keep her at home." I read that line twice. Then a third time. Mom won't need the cash this year if we keep her at home. Grandma had not chosen home because it was best. Dad had decided home was cheaper because he had already used money meant to give her choices. That was the betrayal I could not explain away. Grandma wanted three things. She wanted the assisted living apartment. She wanted a complete accounting. And she did not want Dad arrested. Jordan explained that nobody was discussing arrest. This was a civil protective matter. The goals were restoring assets, clarifying authority, and protecting Grandma's future finances. That mattered to her. "I don't want to destroy my son," she said. Jordan nodded. "Then we build a remedy around your care." We made a plan. As the new agent, opened a fresh account for Grandma's ordinary expenses. Automatic payments were moved. Investment accounts were reviewed. The assisted living deposit was paid. Grandma moved in 3 weeks later. She complained about the coffee and immediately joined the library committee. For the disputed money, Jordan requested a formal accounting from Dad. Dad's attorney argued that many expenditures were made with Grandma's implied consent, and that the cabin was historically a family asset. Jordan responded with the deed. The cabin belonged solely to Dad. That ended the family asset argument quickly. Then came the repayment question. Dad did not have $56,000 sitting in cash. His HVAC business had slowed. He still owed money on his primary house. The cabin had value, but selling it would create its own fight. Grandma surprised everyone. "I don't want it sold." Dad's attorney looked relieved. Then Grandma continued. "I want a lien." I looked at her. She shrugged. "I was a librarian, not an idiot." Jordan smiled. A lien against the cabin would secure repayment. If Dad sold or refinanced the property, Grandma would be paid from the proceeds. Dad could also make monthly payments. It was practical. It attached the debt to the property that received the benefit. That became our settlement position. Repay the proven cabin expenditures. Reconcile any legitimate expenses Dad could document for Grandma's actual benefit. Secure the balance against the cabin. No further authority over Grandma's finances. Grandma would reserve the right to seek additional relief if Dad concealed other transactions. Dad rejected it. He said the lien was humiliating. Grandma said, "Then pay me without one." He had no answer. At home, asked why Grandpa Frank was not coming to dinner anymore. She was 12. I gave her the simplest truth I could. He used Grandma's money in a way she didn't agree to, and the adults are fixing it. Is he bad? No. She waited. He did something wrong, I said. Can both be true? Yes. That question stayed with me. Family betrayal stories are easier when everyone is either victim or villain. Real families are harder. Dad had taken Grandma to medical appointments, fixed her furnace at midnight, sat beside Grandpa during chemotherapy. He had also used her savings on his cabin and tried to make her care fit around the money that remained. Both were true. My plan was not to erase the first truth. It was to stop the second one from continuing. The settlement conference took place in a small hearing room at the county courthouse. Dad arrived with his attorney, sat beside Grandma. I sat behind them with Jordan. Caleb, the contractor, joined by video because his records were part of the accounting dispute. The mediator began with the bank transactions. Dad admitted the cabin vendors had been paid from Grandma's account. His argument was consent. Mom knew I was improving the cabin. Grandma said, "I knew you were improving it. I did not know I was paying." Dad looked at her. "We talked about keeping the property in good shape. That is not the same thing." He sighed. "Mom, the place has been in our family for 50 years. It has been yours for 9. The mediator asked Caleb to confirm the invoice scope. He did. Kitchen, bathroom, deck, flooring, electrical. Dad interrupted. "Some of that was safety work." Caleb nodded. "Deck reinforcement and some wiring, yes. And the kitchen. Upgrade. The flooring. Upgrade. Bathroom. Mixed part repair, part upgrade." Jordan then displayed the email. "Use the same account as the deck. Mom won't need the cash this year if we keep her at home." Dad's face changed. He looked at his attorney, then at me. "You went through my emails." Caleb answered before I could. "That email was in my project file." The mediator turned toward Dad. "Did choose to remain at home because she preferred it, or because you had reduced the available cash?" Dad's voice dropped. "She always said she wanted to stay home." Grandma leaned forward. "I said I wanted to stay home when staying home meant I could manage my own life." Dad stared at her. She continued. "After the fall, I wanted choices." The room went quiet. Then Dad said the sentence that explained almost everything. "I thought I was protecting what Dad built." Grandma's face softened. "Your father built that cabin for us, then I gave it to you." Dad looked down. "You did not need to protect it from me." For the first time, he stopped defending the numbers. He talked about Grandpa, about feeling responsible for maintaining the place, about fearing that if he let it deteriorate, something important would disappear. Grandma listened. Then she said, "You were allowed to feel that. You were not allowed to spend my care money because of it." That was the turning point. Dad agreed to the lien. The final accounting credited him for a small number of legitimate expenses he had paid for Grandma and properly documented. The rest remained his responsibility. The cabin renovation total was $56,800. After adjustments, the repayment obligation was $52,400. No giant courtroom twist. No secret fortune, just the amount the records supported. Dad signed the agreement with both hands flat on the table. He looked older than 63. I did not feel victorious. I felt like our family had finally stopped arguing with a bank statement. Dad repaid $10,000 within 30 days. He used savings and sold a trailer he no longer needed for work. The remaining balance was secured by the cabin. He agreed to monthly payments. Grandma's care account stabilized. More importantly, her decisions became visible. Sent monthly summaries. Grandma reviewed them. I attended only when asked. That was intentional. I had spent months fighting Dad's overreach. I did not want to replace it with mine. The assisted living community turned out to suit Grandma better than any of us expected. She hated bingo, loved the book club, complained that dinner was too early, became friends with a retired judge named Pauline who beat everyone at Scrabble and called Dad the contractor with boundary problems. After Grandma told her the story, Dad did not visit for 6 weeks. Grandma did not chase him. That was hard to watch. Then one Sunday he came. He brought no tools, no paperwork, just a paper bag with cinnamon rolls from the bakery Grandma liked. I was there. So was. The silence when he entered felt physical. Dad put the bag on the table. "Hi, Mom." Grandma looked up from her book. "Hello, Frank." He sat. For a minute nobody spoke. Then he said, "I'm sorry." Grandma closed the book. "For what?" Dad swallowed. That question mattered. An apology without a noun is often just a request to stop being uncomfortable. Dad tried again. "For spending your money on the cabin without asking you, for hiding how much, for acting like taking care of you meant I got to decide." Grandma nodded. "Better." Almost laughed. I looked down at my coffee. Dad continued. "I kept telling myself I would make it right before anyone needed to know." Grandma said, "That is how people get very far into doing something wrong." He nodded. Then he looked at me. "I'm sorry I dragged Dad into it." "Thank you. I thought you were trying to take control. I was trying to give it back." He looked toward Grandma. "I know that now." The satisfying part was not hearing him apologize. It was what happened after. He no longer had access to the accounts. He no longer decided which expenses were reasonable. He no longer could turn years of caregiving into financial authority. And nobody pretended those limits were cruelty. The cabin remained his. The lien remained Grandma's. Every monthly payment reduced the balance. Every payment also corrected something larger. For years, Dad's competence had made the family comfortable giving him control. The consequence was not that we stopped trusting him completely. It was that we stopped confusing trust with the absence of oversight. A year later, Grandma walks with a cane most days. She still keeps the walker for long distances. Her apartment has too many books and exactly one framed photograph of the cabin. People ask why she keeps it. "Because I like the lake," she says. Not because she forgave the money. Not because the cabin became hers again. Because memories do not have to be surrendered just because somebody behaved badly around them. Dad has paid back more than half of what he owes. His HVAC business picked up during a hot summer, and he made 2 extra payments. The lien remains in place. He hates it. Grandma says that is fine. He still owns the cabin, but he cannot refinance or sell it without addressing the debt. That seems fair. Dad and I are careful with each other now. We talk about work, weather, Grandma's appointments. We do not pretend the old version of our relationship survived. It did not. Before all of this, I thought respect meant not questioning my father unless I was certain he was wrong. Now I think respect can include asking for proof before the damage becomes permanent. Aunt visits Grandma every other weekend. She once told me, "I feel guilty I let Frank handle everything." Grandma overheard. "No," she said, "we all let the easy arrangement become permanent." That sentence stayed with me. Families often create roles because roles save time. One person handles money. One person handles medicine. One person plans holidays. One person always gives in. The danger comes when efficiency turns into entitlement. Dad handled money. Eventually, he started believing handling it meant interpreting everyone's best interests. My own blind spot was different. Because I work with older adults, I thought I would recognize financial exploitation immediately. But professional knowledge does not protect you from family loyalty. At work, a bounced care deposit would have triggered questions. At home, I gave my father extra explanations because I loved him. That delay bothers me less now. Not because it was harmless. Because I learned from it. Grandma did too. She asked the new bank advisor to explain every form before she signs it. She keeps her own copies. She knows the approximate balance of her care account. She jokes that she has become financially annoying. I tell her that is my favorite version of her. Last month, Dad invited us to the cabin. Grandma said no. Not forever. Just know, I'm not ready to admire the kitchen, she said. I laughed. Dad did not, but he accepted it. That acceptance was another payment, in a way. Not financial, relational. He was finally letting consequence exist, without trying to negotiate it away. And I no longer felt responsible for making the family comfortable while it happened. If your father had spent an elderly parent's care savings on property he personally owned, but insisted he did it to protect a family legacy, would you have accepted a repayment plan, or would you have forced the property to be sold?